Right. Good morning, all. Are we good?
Good morning, Uncle Jimmy.
That's very good. Thank you. A lot of familiar faces in here today. Yeah. Reprobates from beyond the past. Thank you. Good. So they've kind of wheeled me out to be the warm-up act for the real brains. Let's be honest about this morning, you know. And some of you may know, so next year, in 2026, Curious Pastimes will be 30 years old, 30 years since we started. And if you just kind of take a moment to reflect on that, how much has changed, kind of, you know, not only in Larp, but kind of globally, nationally, and all the rest of it as well. So coming down to the nature of today's talk about kind of the rules, you know, I'll be the first to admit, when we first brought our rule set together, they were of that age. They were 90s rules, kind of, which themselves kind of were built on the rules from the 80s, kind of when Larps first started rolling. But in that, we kind of had an idea that all the things that the players could do in our rule set would affect the world. There would be a persistent world that players could affect and could research and all the rest of it, and be rewarded. You know, the player endeavour gets a reward kind of thing for being a kind of engaged player. So, you know, that's kind of an outset. As you know, we then progressed. I think our first major rule review, if you can call it such a thing, was around 2002. Where we kind of brought a lot of the things together that had accrued already and that started the game. And then, I don't know where the number came from, but our 5.1 rules, which are in the teens of the 2000s sometimes, and we kind of brought that together. So there's been a couple of rules, agglomerations, updates previously. And they've been, you know, it's continued to develop. And in hindsight, really, you know, you realise that so's the hobby, so's the game, so's the players, so's the organisers. That kind of sophistication and possibly that kind of what we understand now is that kind of player-organiser relationship. You know, that's quite an important thing, and it's a lot more sophisticated than it used to be. So again, people here might kind of know that it was always our intention that, you know, we would hand over Curious Pastimes in the director set. And kind of even with the, you know, the sad passing of kind of Mike Dudley, it's kind of brought that on a little further. And we've handed over to what we think set people who kind of know what they're doing. They've come through Curious Pastimes, they've come as players, they've been referees, they've run events, they've organised things. So, you know, we're quite confident in that kind of founding set that we're handing over to, you know, a very good set, very knowledgeable, you know, that we entrust kind of the game to. And so not surprisingly, they're doing a rules review and kind of bringing together lots of those other things that have kind of come together over the years. And I can in this, you know, there is a whole load of people kind of been involved. You know, we could fill this room and some with everybody who's input in some way, different levels. And they brought a whole load of knowledge and kind of game experience to that. But I think within it, though, they've kept that idea of, you know, within the rules that there is stuff for players to do, you know, and then good player interaction, good player challenge will be rewarded, there's a world to explore, and so on, you know. So it's been no small task. So today we've got Sarah and Paul, who are going to kind of get into the details of this. Sarah, you've done quite a large part in kind of ritual magic, coordinating the magic from that area, and you've been kind of going on about Paul about the conjunctive magic and sort of bringing down some of those barriers that have crept up in the game and all the rest of it. So time for me to hand over to the people who've done the real hard work then. So I believe you're going to lead off, Sarah. There you go.
Hi everyone. So I'm going to later on, Paul's going to talk a bit about the design principles of the game. I'm going to talk you through the full process of how we delivered the rules review up to date and some plans going forward. Some of you might know this. The rules review has been going on for actually quite some time. I think it's probably roughly about 3 years now. Although it's not the first rules review that the company has had, it's certainly the largest overhaul that we've had of those rules. And as Jimmy said, this game has been going for nearly 30 years. It has 30 years of history in it, and and with that 30 years of players. So one of the biggest things that we wanted to do with the rules review is make sure that it is something that is supported by the whole of the community. So with that in mind, we started by putting out a massive feedback form campaign about 3 years ago now, where we asked our players to tell us what do you like, what don't you like, what are the problems that you're facing, what do you want to see improved, what do you love about the game. So we gathered all of that feedback, and around about that same time was when the new management board stepped in to start taking reign of the company, and with their guidance of what their design principles were and the feedback that we had, we took all of that away and went, right, okay, there's so much here that we could work on. We could be here indefinitely, but we decided we're going to pick the key areas that have popped up universally throughout all of the different feedback. And so we had those key areas to start work on. So the key areas were character creation, magic, ritual, research, and crafting, and the economy. So once we decided, right, these are the things we definitely need to start working on, we enlisted a bunch of people, of which I am one, which was the rules review coordinators. So our jobs were fundamentally to go into those areas in more depth with the player base and the referees and the community generally, figure out what those issues actually were and come up with a draft. So what we did was we formed a canvas. We did a canvas to form a bunch of focus groups to talk to people about it, because written feedback is one thing, but that's comments on a page. It doesn't really get into the in-depth reasons of like why is something not working or why do you like this thing. As previously mentioned, while we're trying to make sure the game is better, we want to make sure as well that we don't break anything that people actually really love. So part of it, the focus groups, is also finding out, well, what's good? What do you like about this area? What do you need to keep? So once we'd done that, we took all of that focus feedback away, and we built some drafts as individuals in those individual teams, took them back to the focus groups, went, hey, how's this? And sometimes they liked it. Yay! Sometimes they did not, and we took it away and did it again. So once we'd done that, our teams then came back together to work as one conglomerate committee to make sure that each individual area sort of actually worked with each other and that there was balance within the game, because it's all well and good to say, oh, well, I want to make sure I have 10 gold every event, but if that doesn't work with rituals or so on and so forth, then there's not much point putting it into the game. So yeah, there was a good 6 months of just actually rebalancing all of those different areas. The next stage was taking it back to the management board for their approval and review. Once that had been finalised, we then released it to our referee team and then gathered even more feedback from them, because of course with many minds comes much wisdom. So we've then taken that back again and made adjustments. And then finally, as if you're a player who is, we then released it to the players and also took feedback, which we are still conglomerating and making sure and making adjustments. So it's not been a simple process. It's not been a quick and easy write-off. It has been a good 2 to 3 years worth of constant discussions and analysing what we're doing and checking that everything makes sense. And each time you add new people to that changes. That will inevitably change. Our next challenge is putting it into the field. It's not going to be the first time we put it in the field. Actually, last year we actually ran a few sneaky play tests within the main CP events, just on specific areas, just to see how they worked, how the players liked them and not. So far, so good. We're in the off-season now, which means that a lot of our faction commands have really kindly offered to do play testing for their faction events, running the new rules, and after each of those events we're taking further feedback, because there's one thing to read a set of rules and make an opinion on it, and I know certainly I've done this with other games. I've read it and gone, oh, it doesn't really make any sense, I don't like that. But then as soon as you play it, maybe it makes more sense, or vice versa. Maybe it looks wonderful on paper, but in practice, terrible. So now we're on to our excuse me. Now we're on to our playtest area. And so far so good. I'm very excited to see how it plays out. I know we've already run in a few areas and it's gone quite well, but there's quite a lot more faction events coming up. And then the last stage, which you all know, and if you're anything like me, hopefully a little bit excited and a little bit terrified about in equal measure, is the actual going live in April. It doesn't actually stop there though, because one of the things that we've accepted with this review is that the game is constantly changing, and if we are working to make a rule set as a community, we need to be adaptable as well, which means that we'll take the year's worth or so on of playtesting experience and going live in the field, and then if we need to, we will adjust again, and that's what hopefully for everybody will make a live, living community rule base that everybody can enjoy. So I'm going to hand over to Paul now. He's going to tell you all about the design principles. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. So the first thing we implemented, and this was going to be implemented regardless, but it just fell nicely in with the rules, you're right, is the removal of race within Curious Pastimes. Now, the reason we did this was it was a bit silly that some races were a bit better than others at certain things. That's not how the world works. So we binned off the idea of race and went with the idea of cultures. What does this mean? Well, simply that you're embracing where your character is from rather than what your character looks like, and what the physical features and so on and so forth. We wanted to embrace the idea that your roleplay and your character's actions took precedent over their looks. Does this mean that we got rid of phys reps? No, not at all. Now your character can look like what they want to look like within reason. And are we getting rid of terms like elf, orc, so on and so forth? We are no longer using them within the back end of our system.
Or nice.
We are no longer using them within the paperwork and back ends of our system, but if a character identifies themselves as such, that is what they are, and that's how the world works now. We also decided to remove any hidden barriers. For example, there was a number of hurdles you had to have within the game, such as demonology, necromancy, thaumaturgy, that stopped characters playing these games because if it was monetary, whatever, you know, there were several factors. And for a new player or even a new character, some of these obstacles were next to impossible to conquer. So we did away with hidden hoops people need to jump through, and you can play what you want to as soon as you start your character. This made the game super accessible to everyone, regardless of your group size, faction, or income. We also want to encourage collaboration within the game. What does this mean? Curious Pastimes is a game of collaboration, and that has been a design principle from day one to understand. So we want to introduce more specialized characters so they can do more than one specific thing and do that well. But we will need to seek assistance to do other tasks, which is why we introduce archetypes. These are Scout, Magician, Warrior, and Creator. We felt these covered the baseline of most character types. We also introduced a flatter leveling structure, I guess you could call it. We introduced this because new characters excuse me. We introduced this so that new characters still felt as strong as older characters, but if the older characters wanted to flex and show off, they still could with their special abilities that they've gained from being in the war host so long. This will hopefully help new characters feel like complete characters from day one, and anything else they learn is just little cherries on top of their cakes. We also realize that some players don't come to every event, which is fine. And we wanted to not punish people for not attending every event. One of the major things, one of the things that the old system had was called veteran picks, which had a very convoluted way of earning them through attendance of events. Now, with the experience system progression, we are able to offer our players a chunk of their XP after the first event, with small further increments of XP the more events you attend. But the majority of your XP gets dealt to you after your first event, which you can then spend after your first event, rather than at the end of the year. One of CuPa's greatest game aspects is the research system. We all love research. That was offered to players. They could research pretty much anything they wanted within the game. And we wanted to keep this, in fact, expand it and standardize it so it was easier for everyone to understand. Not only that, we made research faster. We want players to use their new cool skills as soon as possible. So we removed the sometimes years of research before you can do something cool and made it quicker overall. We also codified and standardized this across many streams. As mentioned before, we also standardized the research of any flavor, but overall research systems within the magic, mundane, and crafting. So even progression and thematic progression across all research projects. Finally, we're introducing support for digital systems. We are hoping to introduce and integrate digital systems within research and crafting systems, with hope eventually to log your research and crafting. You only need to go to a tablet within your camp, fill in your details, fill in what you're doing, then do your role play. Cut down queues for everyone. We all love that. So where are we at right now? As Sarah said before, we're at the stage of testing. We're doing multiple tests over faction events, to see how it goes, and if anything needs final little tweaks. We're trying to reduce that as much as possible because everyone's learned the rules, obviously, so far. Why do I lie to myself? We also, as you're aware, launched the digital character creator, and hopefully everyone's enjoying that and the ease of creating a character now rather than using pen and paper. We're also introducing more training and more learning for both volunteers and players. So if you want to come and help within the game, and if you're already a helper within the game, we're hoping to make more of that, essentially, and make it easier for you to do that. We're also building a standardized bestiary, so hopefully less inconsistencies within monster statting now. So that's it. Any questions on the rules?
You can say no.
You can.
You mentioned about the research map with my character My character is an alchemist. You mentioned about research doing it almost online. Does that mean I have to part around the laptop or smartphone or something?
No.
I'm not quite sure how that would work.
So previously what you'd have needed to do with doing your research is log it with a research ref and or write it down on a form in the field. What we're hoping to introduce is tablets in faction camps and other things like that, so that we're supplying the technology. So instead of needing to scribble down on a bit of paper, especially for some people that are just awful at writing stuff down, like myself, you get to use a tablet that, if we're really lucky, you might even be able to talk, and it will do the talk to text thing for you. She says Adam is not paying attention, so that's cool. He doesn't know I've just said that. No, it's fine. It's cool. I didn't say anything bad. So the idea is that you don't need to bring your own tech. It's our tech that will be in the field, available for you to use, and it's just going to make the process easier. And it means the admin backlog for us is a lot easier because you don't have someone then translating all of the written down forms into onto a database, basically. So yeah, no, you don't need to go online.
What happens if the tech fails?
What do you mean? What if the tech fails? So I've never known technology to fail. We will have. We will also have paper forms as backups because obviously sometimes technology might be a little bit naughty, but you know, I have full faith in technology, especially anything that the game supplies for. But yeah, there will be also backups. There will also be paper copies, so that if it does fail, then you can still do your research. That you don't have to not research anymore. Cool.
Can I just jump in at the end on that? Sorry, just to finish off. That's a good example of one of those barriers you mentioned that almost crept in unintentionally, you know, that the way we did things carried on. So, you know, Sarah's just kind of said that we've got a plan and we accept it may not be bulletproof 100%, but the thing is now we're aware of those kind of things as well. So in the change, we're very much aware of like, there could be a problem, we will keep addressing that sort of thing. So that's a very good example of that point.
So still on the same subject, if we're going and talking to the research rep or whoever, actually, quite often, somebody's already tried that, it's failed. Could you try that? It's the actual conversation with the person who knew a bit about the research that actually made part of it as well.
Sorry, just say that last bit again.
That it actually made it part of the process. Is going and saying, I want to research this. And, well, in Southgate, Peter banged his head gently on the table and goes, everybody's tried that.
So one of the big things we wanted to do with research is part of the standardisation. Sorry, I can't speak. The standardisation of it overall, which should hopefully make the process simpler. So to begin research, you're going to need to log it with a research ref. Full stop, and that's where you can have your initial conversation with another person and kind of go, right, does this even work? What am I aiming madly, or is this an achievable thing? You can have that opening conversation, but hopefully as well, because we've got the process that means when you not until you get to properly experimenting, you can actually go ahead and do stuff, so you're not constantly stuck in queues. You can go ahead and do your research in your own way, and then when you try something, when you do an experiment, you try something, then you get that face-to-face time again, and you go, oh, okay, well, I've tried this. Why did it explode? And then you will hopefully get some relatively useful feedback. If it did explode, why it exploded. Or if it succeeded, then that's great, and then you know you're on the right path. So hopefully that will help everybody progress in a sensible way. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Go for it.
Reading through the rules, it's quite clear that there's more of a move to refs making decisions and monitoring and checking things. The refs already under a lot of strain with work. What support are you going to have for them taking these additional duties?
Yep. So one of the things we always try to do with our referees, we have a thing called staff camp where we kind of go and do some learning. We are trying to instigate more regular training throughout the years. One of the biggest processes we have as a game team, however, is checking. And if we try and instigate no other thing for any of our refs, it's that there's always a place that you can go back and check to, so that if even like nobody expects a referee, and if any of you did previously, I'm sorry to disillusion you, nobody should expect a referee to be an encyclopedia of all knowledge, even if there is David Moore. So we're not here to be your encyclopedias. We are here to be your channel and conduit to find the answer that is written down somewhere. So that's the main key that we have with our training, is kind of actually go and check. It's okay to check. We all have radios for a reason, and that's why. And hopefully it can be a bit of a learning exercise between us and all of the players as well, because you may have read stuff and not be quite sure. We may have read stuff and also not be quite sure. channel, and that's why we have a singular channel at the top that is GMT and game team, where we can actually go and check those things and make that okay. And hopefully that's a good learning exercise. That's a positive thing going forward, rather than, oh no, I have to learn all of these new rules now. Steve?
Just a couple of things, sort of in response to your question. So, over the last year, CuPa have introduced a staff wellbeing team, so we now have a team of professionals. Staff wellbeing team, so there's a team of professionals basically there to support the staff if they've got any issues, need to speak to. They can regularly come around and check on us and make sure everything's right, something like that. And the big change, which has been long overdue and really good, faction referees now get half-price tickets, so they're being rewarded for their work. So we don't feel quite so bad in leading on those referees. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I just realised that wasn't a question.
No, I was happy to upset.
Cool. I think both. Let's go Mike, and then we'll go around.
So there's been a lot of discussion online about the design. So I already know the answer to this question, but I think it's really important to out it to the rest of the players and potential customers. So there's been a lot of talk that there is a particular style of build or character style that is more powerful than the other. I know that when the game was designed, it was designed with a rock, paper, scissors mindset, that a particular style of build would defeat this but not that, and everything has subtle balancing. So, for example, we've had the rules open to us for what, 4 or 5 weeks? You've had it for some years, and there are subtleties and differences that may not be visible. So how would you address the current initial knee-jerk response to my question about one build is better than the other?
Play the game. It's genuinely, I said it earlier, it's really easy to read a rule set and make a judgment based on numbers and maths. What you haven't done, if your judgment is based on that, what you haven't done is looked at the psychology of human beings. Everybody is different. Everybody plays in different ways. You might have a way that you specifically play, but you are not everybody. And this is a festival game. It incorporates 1,000 people now. There's a lot of different people. Play the game and let's see what happens in game. That is my best answer for that. Yeah. Cool. Ed.
I'm a big fan of the rules, just to place context on how I'm about to answer. I think you've done a great job, so thanks. One of the very few things I wonder about is the camp, which I'm in favour of, can run into difficulty with unknown research costs. And I'm wondering what the thoughts are on, I want to research something, I don't know how many points it is, like, should I reserve a certain number of points, do I get a rewrite if it's too many points, do I have to disregard if it turns out that it's going to require too many to incorporate into the character, as in what is now unusual within the system, which is the meshing of the unknown with the known.
Right, so we ask, is this basically about, well, we don't currently know how many points we need to reserve to fulfill our current research? Yeah. So Adam's over there, so I might just ask Adam to come and just say, just because I'm going to say what I think is the right answer, and then he can correct me. So basically, if you, for most people, I think basically there's only 3% of people in the player base, just to reassure people. Some of them are in the room to help. Of which you're all here. Thank you very much. The only people that is possibly going to be a problem for is about 3% of the player base, and on those specific instances, if you know you're already at your cap before you even spend research points, come and have a conversation with us so that we can help you, and we will do our best to transfer it over. For most people, the amount of points that you're going to spend on your research it's not going to be a problem. It will fit within your cap. If you think you are one of the people that applies to, come and chat to us, and we will sort it out, won't we, Andrew?
Yeah. So I think there's also probably a second part to it, which is this is very apparent during the conversion of long-lived characters. Yes, in theory, for new characters, there's still that bit of I don't know what I'm going to learn, and so I don't know how much it's going to cost me in the long run. But that's kind of part of the story. So you go out, you experience your story, you go, this is the direction I want to go. You might even get to a point where you have maxed out and go, I really want to hit this pinnacle of research, and so I'm going to go into the ritual circle and give up part of what I am and change my story because that's what I want to be. So I think for conversion it's complicated because of, we've never had these caps before, but I think once you get over that initial hurdle, the majority of new characters, it will just become part of their story because that growth is more gradual. We're just seeing it in a slightly elevated context at the moment because it's converting over certain characters that have been around for a long time and have a lot of research in a system that wasn't constrained in the same way.
Well, I can't fit in every single skill that I had previously because that's not the design of the new game. But not to be fair, some of the skills you had previously you probably never used and didn't actually want anyway, and you just took because, you know, what's another pick of corporeal magic anyway? So you don't always you don't always need those skills. It will take a little bit of time and transition and thought. The other side of that is that then because people have sort of built on over time, we've got a build on of like crafting became a thing, and then conjoint magic became a thing later on. People have played in the style that, well, okay, so I'm a warrior, but now I'm learning to craft because I can. So they always look at themselves like they are a warrior and not like a creator. Whereas in reality, after playing for 5-10 years, actually they're probably far more of a creator than anything else. And so sometimes it's about just finding switching the mindset of actually what you do as a narrative in game, rather than going strictly on paper what were my previous skills versus what I do going forward. Hopefully that helps. Cool.
Not directly rules related, but adjacent to the changes we go through at the moment. You talk about having more tech in the field. Do you think there's an interest in looking at how monstering and monster briefing in particular is done? Because at the moment it seems as though that process is what comes generating sheets, minute sheets. Do you think there's an opportunity now to look at maybe automating it in the same way you would have a tablet device and a faction table?
You're working on the beast room?
Oh, no.
No? Oh, shoot. Go on then.
Very good question. I wish I had an answer. We haven't got an answer to that question, and it's a good point. And I think that's something we might need to discuss going back to the ranch.
I think one of the points I would say, especially with the kind of tech point, because you kind of we had a lot of this conversation during the rules review process, like, oh, we can do this in tech and tech answers everything. Tech doesn't answer everything because everything needs a process that doesn't rely on the tech. Now, the issue with the monstering side of things is the biggest delay is largely how long it takes to read the sheets when you get to the hut. Now, does that mean in the future, if the encounters were pre-known, we couldn't make those available to the faction ahead of everybody going up? But all you're doing then is moving the 10-15 minutes reading the sheet from the monster hut down to the faction while they're mustering. So tech is useful, but it doesn't always overcome some of these problems. And that might be the trade-off. We go, actually, that's a good thing to spend 10 minutes in camp before walking up with the sheets, rather than but that then doesn't account for last-minute changes.
I know one of the things that we talked about previously, I don't know where we are, but the changes to account sheets and that, which makes service is starting a conversation. I think part of that will address some of that issue as well. Obviously, I don't know what it is, we get an idea of what that is and how we envisage that working.
You mean the standardization process? So templating isn't a new thing in the tech world. We have lots of creature types that are fairly similar to each other every time, and from a game kind of running perspective, especially for the faction commands and refs that have to help with this stuff, it's I want this monster, I have to go find this document somewhere over here and drag it across and type it in, and I'm going to create a typo or something's not going to be quite right. Yes, from our back office, the next kind of set of iteration is to go, okay, you want demon, what level, this, what type, this, and then it will start to generate all those stat blocks. Now, does that make it easier for factions that are monstering? That may be, but it also might be more consistent, which might make it slightly easier. Sarah?
I know before I left you, I was taking discussions about the way they work in the hubs. So there's going to be a faction liaison for a different week there to make sure before your faction start there, your faction monsters are ready to go to start.
Yeah, and that would be the non-digital way of doing it. But and I think all these things have their own part to play to make it as most of a streamlined process as possible. But I'm always cautious on going, tech will fix this, because tech will fail. Because that's life.
No, it won't. It's perfect.
Clearly, you don't work in tech for a living.
We've just got to